never be another person that can say they did the roles that I did at the time that I did them. They thought that I was crazy. They didn't understand it. And what I told them was...
How many different roles did you have at Google at the time?
I had 4 roles across 6.5 years.
4 roles, 6.5 years. So you moved like once every 1.5 years. Let's start with how you thought about this back then when you started your career at Google, and then some of the key learnings you had along the way.
Funny story. Way back in the day, moral of that story is...
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Open to Work podcast. I'm super excited to be joined today by Carla McIntosh, the former VP of Talent Acquisition at Reddit. Took them through their IPO there. Amazing story. I can't wait to hear more about it. But she's also a 25-year staffing industry veteran and literal veteran of the Air Force. I'm so excited to have you on, Carla. Thank you so much, especially with all of our technical difficulties that we've just been experiencing. I won't go into how long it took us to solve these, but thank you for pushing through, and I can't wait to get stuck into this conversation.
Awesome. I'm super excited to be here.
So I guess, to kick off with, we start the Open to Work podcast in the same way every single time. So just as if you were answering in an interview, tell me about yourself.
I am someone that has just a passion for people and paying it forward. And I am super excited about the talent acquisition field in general. And so being asked to be a part of a podcast like this is a true honor for me. In my time in the Air Force, got to meet people from all different walks of life and then entered into the staffing field. And, it really was the right thing for me because it quenched my thirst for learning and ongoing self-evolution and the ability to help organizations grow and also help invest in the next generation of talent acquisition folks. It's just really been my life's work. So very excited just about where the industry is going. And most importantly, for those folks that are connected to tech organizations, talent acquisition folks really are helping to reshape the world through bringing great talent to tech companies that are making our lives easier. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, awesome. I love that. A little bit of advocacy for the talent acquisition community. I think, when we think about candidates and the experience that they're getting around the world at the moment, they probably wouldn't be as enthusiastic in supporting talent acquisition folks and see them as a bit more of a roadblocker. So it's great to see a bit more advocacy. Maybe you could speak to the impact that talent acquisition recruiting has on a business and why it is or isn't an important role based on, I imagine you're going to say it is an important role, otherwise you wouldn't be doing what you do, but why is it such an important role for businesses, and help us understand on the outside?
Yeah, great question. Talent acquisition is literally the key to the ignition. So no matter what a company's strategic objectives are, you cannot achieve those if you don't have the right people in place. And it's just as simple as that. There's no set of objectives that can be obtained if you don't have the right people, and the ability to attract the right talent and also have vision to say, are the people that we're hiring going to be the right people to drive our mission forward in the next 3 years? So talent it's something that no company can be successful without having the right folks, decision makers, people to go out and, like communications teams right now, like a company going through IPO, you have to have exceptional communications folks that are working. You have to have exceptional technical expertise that are building and developing applications and different software and products. You have to have excellent legal people who are out there keeping your company out of harm's way. You have to have exceptional human resources folks to, ensure that you're retaining, developing, and growing the people that you do hire. So talent acquisition, though, is the key to all of that.
So I completely agree with you. Firstly, I used to say that the two most in a software company, the two most important roles in your business are your sales development representatives and your recruiters. The salespeople are the first people that speak to your clients, and the recruiters are the first people that speak to your employees. And I think that nothing in the business happens without the people that it brings in. And when you kind of take a step back, if you're a recruiter listening to this, really absorb that. Because the value and the impact of your role as a result of the people you're bringing in is massive, one of the biggest in any organization. But then if you're a candidate, understand that they're you're really trying to make sure they're solving business problems with your hire. They're not doing it hopefully just to deliver a role. They're doing it because they genuinely want to solve business problems that are ahead of them. I mean, what's your if you're kind of thinking about the candidates and the kind of disconnect, and you've managed significant recruiting teams at the moment, what's your kind of diagnosis around why candidates might be feeling frustrated about the service they're receiving from recruiters right now, if it's such an important role?
No, I think, I wish that this weren't true, but, not every recruiter in every company is stellar. And I think I don't solely put it on the recruiter. I think that especially over the last 3 to 5 years, a lot of talent acquisition teams are not adequately resourced. So they're being asked to do more with less. And I think on top of that, and what a lot of the job seekers don't understand is, it is not uncommon now for any requisition to have thousands of applicants. And so, any role could have a couple of different applicants, and those folks at top of funnel, it's still the recruiter's job to screen or review the information or talk to a large majority of those folks. And, some people really rise to the occasion. Other folks, unfortunately, when they're engaging with candidates, that fatigue, or in some cases, it could be a little bit of indifference, it does rear its ugly head. And I think that, I, as a recruiter, and I will, no matter how high up I go, I will never abandon, for me, the integrity around being just a good recruiter at my core. I think those who play the long game, who realize that, if you want to be in this field for a long time, how you treat every single candidate matters. As an example, there are people that I may have personally recruited when I first started 25 years ago. And because of the experience I provided to them, there's nothing that I couldn't call those candidates and ask for today. And I prided myself on that and always said, if it were me, how would I want to be spoken to? The importance of no updates, and just honesty throughout the process. Remembering that, a person may be someone that's a job seeker today, but, in 5 years, they could be in a very important position within a company and need to speak to your experience and sort of how you work, or they might be in a position to give you a role. So really being mindful of how you interact with candidates is important, and just remembering, the human as you connect with people, even when it's difficult and hard and when you're tired, it's just very important. I think, in my opinion, when you agree to be in this field, it's bigger than solely you. You have to understand the importance of it. And the other thing in economies like today is how you interact with candidates can completely destroy their confidence, or it can give them hope. And if you're someone like me, I want to be on the side of hope.
Alderson James are one of the leading people and talent agencies. Since 2013, they've been responsible for over 1,000 people and talent hires, including one in a company that I used to work at. They helped me hire my head of technology TA. So I know the guys there pretty well. They've been responsible for scaling some of the most innovative companies in the UK and the EU. Also recently just launched in the US. So even folks in your neck of the woods now, James, can get involved for contingent, retained, and executive search. And they also now do embedded through AJX. So they can do it all.
So you have I'd love to get into your career a little bit more detail, because I think there's so much learning for the general kind of the general public on your background. So you spent the predominant kind of part of your career when you once you'd moved into recruiting in at Google, but you didn't have like a linear path. And so I'd love to maybe talk about this as it kind of relates to internal mobility, because you had many different roles there. How many different roles did you have at Google at the time?
I had 4 roles across 6.5 years.
4 roles, 6.5 years. So you moved like once every 1.5 years. So if you were outside of Google, you'd be jumpy. People would be saying, you don't want to hire Carla. She's got too much. She's too jumpy. But because you do it within Google, it's a very impressive background. And I think it speaks to the value. Like most of the jobs that you'll get through your career, many of the jobs you'll get through your career is through internal mobility. So I think it's really important that we talk about how to navigate the internal career marketplace within your own business as part of your open to work conversation. So maybe let's start with how you thought about this back then when you started your career at Google, and then some of the key learnings you had along the way.
Yeah, thank you for that. What's interesting and unique about Google and probably other tech companies is, when a person comes in, I think there becomes kind of a vision for that person's career. And in my case, very early on, I was someone that I think the company, the staffing organization, saw me as a leader that they wanted to invest in. And so, for lay person's terms, just they wanted to maybe empire build around me, and that was going to be my career. And I remember when I wanted to make my very first move out of core recruiting into a new group. I was explicitly advised against doing that. People thought that I was nuts. I was leading a very sizable team, and I take this quirky role, being kind of a program manager lead, de facto chief of staff at the time for a technical infrastructure group. And part of why I did that was because I wanted to play the long game. I am a person that likes to skill build. And unfortunately, in careers, a lot of people assume growth means literal promotion, or being a people leader.
Hmm.
More power, the bigger the org that you have. But for me, I pride myself on really getting unique experiences that over the long game, when I'm looking for that role that I don't even know I want yet, it will position me in a different way and give me a competitive advantage. So if you look at the 4 roles that I had across Google, almost all of them were working with sort of nascent or startup type organizations. And so what I knew about that is, in the course of history at Google, and in the world, there will never be another person that can say they did the roles that I did at the time that I did them. And I knew that that would have a value for me. So my first move was moving from leading all of the Bay Area software engineering and global business recruiting organizations for some key things like Waze, Google.com, apps and product infrastructure, and numbers of different groups. I left that role and then went into tech staffing infrastructure, where I worked as kind of a chief of staff.
Maybe let's pause there. So how, just to contextualize this, how big was the recruiting team that you were overseeing when you decided to leave that business unit and join in that new role?
I think at the time, direct folks was probably 25, and then I had the global responsibility for about 6 different global product areas
Okay.
across Google at the time. I actually had 2 different jobs that they combined into one when I
Okay.
joined the company. They had never done that before, so it was
Wow.
a pretty massive undertaking. And but it was weird. It was the right call, but to a lot of folks, they felt like I gave up my power because I
Yeah.
essentially was an individual contributor. What I learned in that was that I was able to do some very cool things. So by me seeing the long game, that was at a time where cloud was exploding for Google, and they were doing a lot of mergers and acquisitions and things like that. So by me just taking that risk, I was tapped to lead 2 staffing integrations for 2 of their largest acquisitions at the time, for Kaggle and Apogee. And those are things that, had I stayed in my old role, I would have never gotten an opportunity to do. I also had an opportunity to end up writing all of the staffing and global recruiting OKRs. I had got an opportunity to build the diversity playbook that all of the recruiting teams across Google ultimately used to bring more inclusion to their teams. Again, these are some of the things that I would have just
Mm.
never had an opportunity to do. And then on top of that, I was given an opportunity to lead global culture for recruiting. Again,
Wow.
something I would have never gotten the opportunity to do in my old role. So very quickly for me, it had personal dividends. Now, what I will say, if I'm being candid, at the time, because it was a newly created role, I do think that it halted my literal trajectory, meaning promotability at that point.
Yeah.
But the skills that I learned to this day, they helped me so very much. And it's very unique. As I talk to other recruiting professionals, they just don't have those direct experiences that I have. And so that was the second job. And then the third one, after that, as part of that role, I got to lead all of the leadership development there for all of the managers in recruiting. And so I was then tapped to go and lead emerging tech. They said, wait a minute, if you're one of our best managers, kind of in an IC capacity now, you're developing our leadership strength, we want you to lead emerging tech. And so then I was tapped and went back into a recruiting leadership role across Area 120, which is Google's startup incubator, Daydream, their virtual and augmented reality group, Next Billion Users, communications, photos, like all of these different cool areas. And so I did that. And then in traditional Carla way, after a while there, I had really supported almost all of the product areas at Google directly, with the exception of cloud and ads. And so I was a bit fatigued of just, I'd done a lot of different things. And then came an opportunity to go into the business. And that is what I did for my final role. I was tapped yet again to help to launch the Google Operations Center, which is essentially Google's insourcing work. But all of those different things really helped me. And now I have these unique experiences that are part of Google history that no one else can say that they got to do.
And I imagine that when you especially when you made that first move from managing quite a sizable and growing team by the sounds of it as a leader within Google staffing, to then jump back into an IC role, I imagine there would have been quite a lot of raised eyebrows. Why are you doing this? Like, yes. You must be crazy. Like, what was some of the feedback that you received at the time? Why did people think you were doing what you were doing? Just like you were crazy. Yeah.
People thought that I was crazy. They didn't understand it. And what I told them was, I said, I am doing something that takes a bit of courage. Unfortunately, in people's professional careers, sometimes people live other people's dreams for them. Mm. And so, I remember having just many one-to-one conversations with people more senior than myself and people more junior than myself. And I said, how many people have the courage to do what they want to do? We see it all the time, like even familial pressure for people to pursue a certain career because maybe certain folks in the family did it and no one wants to buck that system. And for me, I just said, I want to skill build and position myself down the line and really play chess and not checkers with my career, understanding that sometimes you go slow to move fast.
You like 100% knew, like, I'm skill building at this stage, because this would have been, yes, before the concept of skills-based hiring came along. That's now, like, we will talk about a bit in a second, but like you were saying, I want to diversify my skill set and become as horizontally broad as I possibly can in my knowledge set.
Yeah, because I think in a company like Google, and as a staffing leader, how often do you get the opportunity to differentiate yourself from other folks? If you think about it, once you've led hiring and you have a sizable team and then you gain more people on your team, it's just more of the same.
You just follow that until you get,
exactly. It's more of the same.
IBM, I don't know.
Yeah. So when you have an opportunity to really collect unique experiences that are strategic in nature, that are historical in nature, and that are most importantly impactful, that was the way that I saw it. I felt like if I invested in myself to get this, to really diversify my toolkit over time, when the big roles become available, my competition will be fewer and far between, because very few folks, when you look on paper at the things that I've done versus what the traditional recruiting leader has done, mine would be a lot more diverse.
We are delighted to be sponsored by Metaview. Metaview is the AI assistant for the interview process. Their AI records and transcribes hiring conversations like interviews, intakes, and debriefs, and then provides a perfectly summarized note of everything that was discussed. That means that you can focus on creating human connections with candidates during calls and save time on the busy work of cleaning up notes after every interview. I've spoken to so many recruiters and recruiting leaders who are loving using Metaview across their organizations. It's saving them time, but it also means that they have more data to make better decisions. So for every candidate and every pipeline, hiring teams can now make confident and informed decisions, and recruiters can finally take control of the interview process. The impact on candidate experience is also massive. Since recruiters don't have to worry about taking notes in the moment, they can really focus on being present and engaged with you. Forward-thinking recruiters at high-performing organizations like Brex, HelloFresh, and Quora are all leveling up their interviews with Metaview. So head on over to metaview.ai/open to work to get started for free on your first 5 calls.
And I think there's loads of different learnings. And I think for one of my first takeaways is to kind of really consider the ego behind why you want the role that you want. Yes. Right? Like, because another person wouldn't have been like, no, I don't do IC anymore. I'm not an individual contributor. I won't get hands-on on the tools anymore. And it'll be not because they can't do it. It's because they either don't want to, or they have like an ego that's suggesting that they might not want to do it. It's not the right title or whatever it is. And I think that is a really big part of how we make decisions potentially through like lots of people's career, rather than looking at the entire opportunity and all these other things that you're talking about, skills. It's what's the title? Is the pay the same as what I'm doing at the moment? Like, it's these ego triggers rather than like career building triggers.
Yeah, and I think, a really funny story, kind of in that same vein, Ego is absolutely one of the things that keeps people kind of down a different path, because they're worried about perceptions of other people. But I will take a step back and tell you. So when I was in San Antonio, and I had been leading my own recruiting company for over a decade, and Google had previously tried to recruit me probably about 18 months into starting my company, and I told them no, I wasn't going to move, etc. But then once I had been in business through two economic downturns, and had been there for 10 years, I said, okay, I'll be open to Google. And so the very first role that they approached me for, and what I learned in hindsight, I think it was probably an opportunistic type of hire, but the role that was initially presented to me was in fact as an individual contributor to manage executive stakeholders in the ads business. And so
Mm.
I ended up taking the role. And again, it comes back down to that confidence. I felt like I get into an organization like Google, I will be able to show what I can do. And
Yeah.
I'm not worried about the career part. It will work out for me once they see what I can do. Well, about 2 weeks, 1.5 to 2 weeks after I'd accepted this role, they called me back. The person that would have been my hiring manager called me back and said, hey, during your interviews, the person who assessed you for leadership, you did really, really well. And in good conscience, I couldn't hold the fact that he has a couple of opportunities on his team. And she said, you know what? He has two roles. We would like to combine these two openings into one to give you greater scope and bring you in as a people leader and manager if you'd like to do so. So when I mentioned earlier in the podcast, I had two roles. The role was to lead all of the Bay Area software engineering across search, Waze, Geo, a number of different groups. Literally the most competitive space for Google in recruiting is Bay Area software engineering. And then a separate role, which was the global tech staffing leader for a product area that now doesn't exist, but it was called Streams, Photos, and Sharing. So think of Google
Mm.
Plus, Google Photos, all of their streaming apps, all of that was combined. So it was the first time they had ever combined two
Yeah.
different roles like that, where a person not only led the global recruiting efforts, but also managed the resources supporting some of those efforts. And so that served as a proof of concept that it ended up replicating across other groups. And, the moral of that story is I had the humility to not be caught up in title and to
Yeah.
say, sure, I will take an individual contributor role, because it's not about the title, it's about the impact. And even that role that I took, the first one leaving Google recruiting, that role arguably really elevated my standing in the organization and my impact because of the rooms that I got to sit in. As an example, Google's probably 13th hire ever. I was in rooms with that particular engineering leader, advising him on diversity strategies, something that would have never been possible
Yeah.
at the time before. So I just think that you have to see the vision, and you have to have the courage to put yourself out there a little bit. Because what I've learned is you never will be worse off broadening your skill set.
Yeah, and I completely agree, and it's really exciting to hear someone of your tenure as well kind of go through, because I think when you, in the moment that you are like making that decision, I imagine it was quite nerve wracking. You're like, it's probably less money than you were earning as an agency person. Yes, it's Google, but like I'm an IC again. I don't really want to be an IC, but then to be able to see the journey that's come after that and the amazing career that you've been able to have, that having changing the framework that you evaluate a company, to remove your kind of ego and to be like, what is the long term? What is the skills I'm going to acquire? What the rooms are going to be in? What is the real opportunity here? And what could that look like in 3 or 4 years' time if I'm going to place a bet on myself?
Yeah, you have to understand too. I think when companies are advertising for a role, or especially when it's a role that someone else previously had before, that person shaped the quote impact and value that the company perceives around that role. But anytime you start a role, it's a ground floor opportunity. You can completely reshape the value and the impact that role can have. You can broaden it. You can elevate the stature of that role. It's completely up to you. Or you can use that role to work yourself into your dream job. Because if you go in with vision and you're looking and you're a solutions oriented person, and you go in with humility, which is important, and you are willing to do whatever it takes, but you look around and you see opportunities to add more value, and then you put a plan behind that, and then you pitch it and you say, here's why I am the perfect person to help solve for whatever these 2, 3,
Yeah.
5 things are. You can work yourself into your dream opportunity, but you never will go wrong by having humility. And I think, let's just talk about titles as an example. Funny story, way back in the day when I was in the agency world, you're cold calling people and you would be so happy to get a lead. And you're like, this is so-and-so, they're the IT director. In many cases, they weren't actually the IT director, they were the IT guy. As
Yeah.
an example, you had a great title, but then you lifted the
Yeah.
hood and you
Yeah.
were pretty much just the tech person. I say that to say it is not solely about the title. It is about the work that you do and how you speak about the work that you do. Your job can be as important or as insignificant as you make it. It's
Yeah.
completely up to you as the employee.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. So talking a bit about kind of internal mobility and skills acquisition, I think it feels like, and I'd love to hear your sense on this, that the workforce will continue to be lean. It won't be, and companies will not hire in the same way they hired before, and people will be looking for broader selections of skills than they were in the past. Let's say, if you were kind of earlier in your career now, what advice would you give to people who are early in their career now, who are looking for their next job with this kind of with internal mobility and with skills kind of acquisition in mind?
I would say, I mean, specifically those in talent acquisition, but really any field right now. But those in TA, it is important to be an SME, obviously, to have your fastball. What is the type of recruiting that I'm really exceptionally qualified to do? However, I think that any opportunity that a person has to broaden their skill set. So, as an example, if a person is hiring software engineers, but they have an opportunity to hire across G&A, sales and marketing, or product, it benefits them to do that. Reason being is when a lot of companies are growing now, you could have one person who is an expert in just one flavor of recruiting or another person that's more diversified. Inevitably, the person that has a broader skill set is going to be the more attractive candidate for that particular company. But separately, as companies are thinking about downsizing, are you going to keep your SME in one thing or the person that's a bit of a Swiss Army knife across many different types of recruiting? So you actually improve your individual value proposition for the company by broadening your skill set. So I would say, lean into things with enthusiasm and want to learn different things. Don't be pulled in. I think you ask for those opportunities because that also, shows that you have a growth mindset. And that type of employee is just much more valuable in today's market.
Completely agree, and I think there's like another layer to this, which as well. So I love the idea of having a spike. So you just what's the thing that you are like the best at in the business, and that everyone's going to go to you to. But then you broaden, you horizontally broaden in things and become, and broaden that knowledge. And hopefully your spike gets wider and wider and wider. And I love that idea. But there's also this other layer of like, in order to proactively suggest how you can support the business, you need to fully understand the business. And that is like, if you ask us to kind of summarize internal mobility, you're much more likely to be successful. Instead of saying, hey, can I get more opportunities? Is, hey, I understand your business problem and I think that you're going to have a challenge here. Is it possible? Like, here's how I think I can help. Is it possible for me to start a project, or can we talk about like me broadening my skills to help solve that problem? Because no one else is able to solve that right now, and I'd love to learn. Like, that is having a specific ask based on your knowledge of the business is going to really position yourself more effectively to get that next role.
Yeah, and I think it's important. I mean, so companies right now, when they look at the prototypical person they want to hire, across the board, I always hear they want people who can see around corners. And so one of the easiest ways that anybody, you don't have to be in TA, any leader that's a senior leader that's impacting the company's strategy, you want to ask them some questions. Things like, what are the 3 big rocks you and your org are trying to move? What are the things that are keeping you up at night? Why does that matter? Once you then learn knowledge is power and you then can speak to that, you can, maybe it unlocks something in your background where you've previously had experience with one of the things that is really causing them strife at that particular moment, and you can immediately carve out a lane for yourself, or maybe it's just something that's really interesting that you've always wanted an opportunity for, and you can say, wait, hey, if need be, I would love to help you with that if the time comes. I'm really excited about this. And what we know is people tend to want to help those that they feel are excited about the business and who understand the stakes. But I also think that, when people think about their impact, it allows them to understand how the day-to-day tactical work they're doing is tying to that North Star. Because what happens is you can kind of self-harm if you don't do your diligence to understand the North Star of a company and what the company is really trying to do. Day to day, you can feel like you're, just hiring people. But if you really understand like what's going to happen if we hire this person, but most importantly, what is the danger or the risk involved to the mission if we don't hire, this person or these sets of people, and that actually helps you with that level of importance that you need to fuel like my work is really, really important. Going back to what I said, being the key to the ignition, you have to understand what kind of car are you trying to build. You got to understand that first.
You can't just have a key. You have to know what it drives, right? Remember that phrase. That is going to get you. If you're in an interview and you're asked, what are the big rocks? What's keeping you up at night? You will unlock a really interesting answer that you'll be able to speak to, and then you could try and live solve that problem with them, and all of a sudden you're one step ahead of the game.
Well, and what the other part of that is important is too, is sometimes by you talking through like the big rocks and what keeps them up at night, and then you have the back and forth dialogue. Sometimes that conversation in itself, it causes them to reimagine their org design, because sometimes you surface gaps in their organization, and you can actually talk yourself into a new job description. They didn't realize they needed a person to do something. Like, a lot of the things that are happening in corporate right now is roles. There's more of these connective tissue roles that are needed. They don't necessarily know what the title is, but they know they need a person that can influence and do some other things. So we're starting to see now kind of more of these Stratton ops roles, but we're also seeing kind of these, other layers of chiefs of staff types of roles that are starting to stand up, because people realize you need a person that can kind of catch a lot of the things that are happening between those core pillar roles. There's a lot of just influence that needs to happen. And so I love having these dialogues, because you can certainly talk yourself into creating a new job.
Yeah, if I kind of reflect on some of the key takeaways, I think like internal and external networking, I think it's obviously ringing through loud and clear. Developing like influencing as a skill as well is just absolutely critical, regardless of what level you are in your career and what role you do. If you're a software engineer, you need to learn how to influence as much as you do if you're a marketer or a product manager or a driver. These are all areas where you can learn how to influence, and influencing will enable you to accelerate your career. And then also skill build. Don't think about the next role on the ladder. Think about broadening the ladder, or what's the next ladder over for you to be able to step onto that's going to enable you to become a kind of really powerful leader in the future. Because as you said, no one has your experience, so really own what that experience looks like. Carla, thank you so much for coming and joining us today on the Open to Work podcast.
Great. Thank you so much.
And so if people wanted to kind of learn more about you or find or kind of follow your musings, you on LinkedIn, presumably, is there any other place to catch you?
Yeah, really just LinkedIn under Carla H. McIntosh. And I try to post fairly often. And on a personal note, I do my best to be available to people. So if folks need to reach out, they can send me a note, and I will do my best to help them as best I can.
Amazing. And from all of us here at the Open to Work community, of the Open to Work podcast, thank you so much for coming on. As a reminder to everyone who's listening, we're here to help you navigate your careers and find kind of the right opportunity for you. Whether that means that you're in work right now and you're looking to take an internal move, there's some great tips here. Or if you're not in kind of currently working, or you're looking for a job that's a new job, then some amazing kind of tips around like networking and stuff like that here. So please like and share and subscribe. That means we know you're listening. And if you have any questions for our guests or for me, please write into us at opentowworkpod@gmail.com. That's opentowworkpod@gmail.com. Thank you so much. And Carla, we'll see you again soon.
All right. Bye.